Don't leave before you send it, Mary. You got it. You got it.
You vouch, right? Say, never mind. Printer doesn't work. We're done.
Wow.
Wow.
That would be a lot of, we're done.
We're
I
done.
know, my husband isn't home, it's like, I don't have my ID yet, it's done.
Sorry.
It's done. We're done.
David started. No.
They're on the.
Sorry, folks, I'm running a little bit behind.
That's cool, good idea,
I know she's.
All right. Nice. All right. Okay, it is Tuesday, June 23rd, 2026, and I call this business meeting of the Elizabeth School District Board of Education to order at 6:03 p.m. Can I get a roll call?
Director Fletcher?
Here.
Director Hunt?
Here.
Director Olson?
Here.
Director Powell?
Okay, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I move that the board amend this business meeting agenda for June 23rd, 2026, to move consent item 8.3, the superintendent contract, to action items, the action items portion of the agenda, and approve the remainder of the agenda as presented.
Second.
Any discussion on that? No? Okay, can I get a roll call?
Director Fletcher?
Aye.
Director Hunt?
Aye.
Director Olson?
Aye.
And Director Powell?
Aye.
Okay, I move that the board approve the minutes from the Board of Education special meetings on June 9th, 2026 and June 12th, 2026. Can I get a second?
Second.
Nicole? Okay. Any discussion on those? All right. Can I get a roll call?
Director Fletcher?
Aye.
Director Hunt?
Aye.
Director Olson?
Aye.
And Director Powell?
Aye.
Okay, so next up, we have board member reports, so who wants to kick it off? No pressure. I will kick it off. Get this elephant out of the room here, so, I want to speak directly to something I know is on people's minds. We've had a lot going on in the district over the last few weeks. We evaluated our memberships and our partnerships, and we left the ER BOCES. We're pursuing legal representation, and we have new leadership. So we've also had executive sessions to meet with our attorneys regarding the ACLU case. And so I think that logically people are thinking, okay, what's going on? Is next up you're dropping your defense of the case. And I just want to make it very clear that no, we're not dropping our defense of our position in this case. One thing that I think gets overlooked, I think people get focused on the books, the content of the books, and there's a lot of argument back and forth. Should they be on the shelf? Should they not be on the shelf? And regardless of the position on that, I think the big picture is getting overlooked. And the big picture is a matter of local control. So if you take away local control and you start dictating what school boards can do as far as what's granted to them, the rights that are granted to them in our state constitution, you basically still the local voice. You still the voice of the community. So I would really like people to understand that this goes beyond the books. It goes beyond the books. It's a matter of people vote to put you in office to do their will. And when you have someone from the outside coming in and saying, well, no, you can't do that, you're basically still the voter's voice, the voice of the community. So that for me is why I remain wholeheartedly committed to the case, and I believe that is the board's position as well. So I just wanted to, clear the air and take the speculation out of it. So no, we're not stepping away from this. So elephant gone.
One elephant.
So anybody else have anything they want to add?
I just want to say well said, thank you for saying that, because it is very true. We are still completely supportive of staying in this case, staying the course. But it is a twofold battle. It is. Obviously, we made the choices that we made because we felt that the books were age inappropriate. That is a choice that we as a local control board made. And if we allow that to sort of just be dissipated and we let it go, we are losing the strength of the local control that we do have as our right. So, well said. Thank you for clarifying that.
And the only thing I would add is that, all three of us ran on a campaign of continuing to support that case and what it stands for, including local control, parental rights. And so I think that that's something our community spoke loud and clear when we won that election. And so I think that
Clearly.
we need,
Yeah.
very clearly,
Overwhelmingly.
that it's a matter of being faithful to the call of the people who elected us as well.
Absolutely.
So, got that elephant out of the way, and something very important tonight, and I want to take a moment. We have several people here with us tonight, and I want to say a very heartfelt thank you, a public thank you on behalf of the board. As we know, and we'll be talking about a little bit more tonight, the district has been working through a series of financial issues, and I want to be very clear that we would not be in a better place had it not been for people coming out and speaking up and letting us know when we needed to know. And that takes guts, it takes integrity, and I want to let you know that we really and truly appreciate it and thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We have some certificates tonight, which is, by no means, it can't equal what we owe you in gratitude, but we want to say again thank you, and I just want to read one little snippet here, so people understand what's on here. So each of you are getting a certificate of appreciation, which reads in part, "In deep appreciation for your exceptional dedication, your resilience and outstanding contributions, for the focus, attention to detail, and commitment that safeguarded this district and exemplified true leadership during a critical time." So, we have people here who came forward. We have, former staff members, employees who came forward and they shared their expertise and their historical knowledge. And we have people that just sat around the table, including you, and hunkered down and helped work through this. So I do want to say thank you very much. So
And you have to come up here and do your
Come on down, or up, or whatever.
Come
and I will say, we'll do announcements in a minute, but Fran is out of town on a well-deserved vacation, but and so is Jamie as well, but we do have the rest of the team here. So we'll start with Andrea. And Jeannie. Yeah, come over here, we can get your picture
Here you go. Yes.
Don't run away too quick.
taken. Me. Michelle. Sierra. And Tracy. And I do have another one here, but I wasn't sure if you wanted to be acknowledged.
No, that's okay.
Are you sure?
I'm fine.
Okay.
We're acknowledging you. We won't make you walk.
They have to get their picture taken.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm so blessed to have such wonderful people in some churches.
Yes,
Yes.
they are all working very hard, yes.
Okay, so now you brought up.
Yeah, just a couple of quick reports again. Thank you to the business department. I know oftentimes in school districts over the summer, there is a little bit of a break and people get find a little more of a work-life balance, but this group here has been working like crazy. We sat in a room last week, I think half the day, and then they all went back and worked, and they've just continued to keep us updated every day, crunching numbers, looking at spreadsheets. So they've been doing a lot of hard work, and I appreciate them. Our maintenance and ops folks have also been working really hard this summer. I think the district's looking better than it's looked in a while, and so we've got a lot of people working. Our literacy coordinator has been doing training for our CELTs, for our dyslexia specialists. Cindy Kanyu, I think we've got 3 or 4 teachers that are going through training. Some summer school things going on at the high school. So just want to thank all of the staff that continues to work over the summer. There's a lot that goes on even in a smaller rural district like ours that I think sometimes gets lost. So I want to acknowledge everybody for that. I also want to make sure that everybody who's watching at home has checked out our Horse's Mouth part of the webpage. Jeff, our communications director, has done a great job getting that up and running quickly. There have been a couple questions about its purpose, and its purpose is to be transparent. We live in a world where sometimes people get their news from social media, and it's usually not all of the truth, if any of the truth. It oftentimes just gets us riled up, and so we're trying to help our community understand if you want the truth, just come to our website and we will post it there. I've already had a couple community members just reach out to me personally and email and ask me questions, and we'll reply back. We're going to give people the truth. Cora is, of course, there legally if people want it, but people can also just email the Horse's Mouth, ask us questions. We've had that happen already. We post them. We're getting Cora requests posted on that page. So I just look forward to continuing to give our community an opportunity to come straight to the Horse's Mouth, hear what's going on, hear the truth as we rebuild that trust, because we haven't always been as transparent as we need to be. So look forward to just continuing to see how that evolves, and want to thank Jeff for his work on that. And then I've got a few more comments that I'll keep for when we start the budget.
All right, any public comment? All right, so next up, we have consent. So I move that the board approve consent items 8.1 through 8.2 as presented.
Second?
And can I get a roll call?
Director Fletcher,
Aye.
Director Hunt,
Aye.
Director Olson,
Aye.
Director Powell.
Aye.
Okay, so on to action items. So first up, we have the, just COPS, right? Not COPS. COPS, okay. SVPP grant approval application. So, I move that the board approve the application of the COPS SBPP grant. Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay. And discussion. You wanna, yeah.
I can if you have questions, yeah.
So can you just give a brief overview maybe?
Yeah, so currently in the district, we are working with a very old and antiquated PA system. The purpose of this grant is to allow us to make significant upgrades, primarily in areas of emergency notification. There are added bonuses to that, where our bell schedule, things like that, where we help out operationally. Currently, we actually have the Valcom system in the district, but it's only at the Singling Hills location. A good example of this, where we desperately need it, is one of our newer buildings, being the high school. They are currently operating on a bell schedule, but anytime we have a power outage or anything of that nature, our office manager has to go in there and re-enter the entire bell schedule for the day or even the week. So a lot of work that goes into that, and we're also identifying gaps where the PA system is connected in ways that it shouldn't have been. The way it's wired, powered, to where even at the high school in the gym, there's a closet where it says "Do not power this down" because it'll basically short circuit the like half if not more of the PA system that's in place. So that in turn kills our emergency notification. There's a lot of really cool things that we can continue to do with the Valcom system. So early on, really what we're trying to do is just start to get the rest of the district on board. So it's not a complete rip and replace. It's nothing like that. It's more of a slow integration into it and then expanding on it over years. How this is being done, we're still working on the finer details of that. We conducted a walk with Valcom and Convergent, who are going to be the two integrators that would help us accomplish this. They're working this week to get us the final numbers to identify what that looks like. Financially, the goal with this, the ceiling is $500,000 with a 25% match. However, Francisca and myself will be working to apply for the waiver. Now, with that being said, if we don't get the waiver, there's a secondary option. That's the micro grant. The micro grant, if you spend under or $100,000 or under on this project, then there's no match requirement. So we're going to run basically two projects side by side, and they're not dependent on one another. So whether we get the full 500 or we're able to get a portion of that 500, depending on what's chosen, we can start to make improvements in our district where it's needed. Other cool features that Valcom offers, it's one of the only systems in the country that we have found that has the standard response protocols already built into it. Not only that, but we have ways that it can incorporate into our existing system very, very easily. So it's a very seamless process. By doing it in the way that we're looking to do this, we can utilize some of the analog technology that we have and then start to make that transition to an IP-based system, which is ultimately what our tech department would like to do. We're also looking at what our current infrastructure is with tech, and if we need to, or if we can, with that money, make upgrades on switches or anything like that, we're also going to consider doing those things, which would really help make improvements for the district's network infrastructure. It also helps out with ADA compliance, so there are digital boards, which I can pass this along to you guys, and it'll kind of give you a little bit of a layout. There's digital boards that we can put in the corridors and eventually into the classrooms themselves. And so if an emergency panic button is hit, it would then on these boards, a light would indicate, and you would also get the digital messaging saying lockdown, lockdown, lockdown. Completely customizable. You can even do it for normal daily operations that you can use these things to get messaging across. For our SPED department, you can increase, decrease volume levels for those in our district who might be sensitive to sound or may need that reduced a little bit, so that way it doesn't create it doesn't trigger or do anything that we don't want to happen, escalate them in a sense. So there's a lot of different things that we're looking at. We're trying to build the framework on what our capabilities are based on the current funding. This will hopefully be a long-term plan of, we'll come up with our initial project plan for this year if it's approved, and then going forward we'll create smaller projects to eventually have a complete system overhaul, but it'll just be taken in chunks. So,
So is the federal grant,
yes.
we all know that sometimes federal grants come with strings. Are there any strings that we have?
Not that I have seen. The only string that I have found is if you spend $350,000 or above, and you choose a single vendor or sole vendor, you have to complete paperwork with that. That's as of right now. That's the only thing that I've been able to identify. So
And then if we were able to get a $500,000 grant with a waiver, so it sounds like there are different pieces to this project, and so the $500,000, do we have to spend it within X number of years or something? And we would spend it across however many of these projects that we could fund using that, is that correct?
So the way that it's laid out, the way that COPS wants us to spend this is we can spend it over a period of 3 years, or we can take it all at one time. So for those who are seeking out a waiver or don't get a waiver, they're just going to go ahead and complete that match. The way that I best understand it is over 3 years, while it is 25%, that 25% would be divvied up over the period of 3 years to kind of lessen that blow on those districts. Obviously, in our case, we're going to be applying for the waiver. If we don't get the waiver, then we'll be aiming for the micro grant. So we're not interested in having any kind of financial responsibility on the district. This is just, we're going to do what we can with the grant, and if we don't get it, we're going to continue to apply through some of our other grants to continue making efforts in this direction.
So then would the approach be like structural, get cable in place, get everything staged, electrical?
Much smaller scale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then just add on to it.
Yep, so at least get the foundation, get the framework, and then build onto that over a period of time.
When will we know?
So the first portion of the grant is due August 4th, and then the final deadline is August 11th. I would suspect about a month or two after that we would truly know. Yeah, we're gonna work pretty hard over the course of July to get this, and so we've already with Convergent and Valcom actually coming out, it looks like we're in pretty good shape with our existing infrastructure to make some pretty big improvements initially. So I'm excited about that.
There's a lot of room to grow.
Yes,
but I
there's a
think
lot of
so.
room to grow, which is good to hear. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we got, can we get a roll call?
Director Fletcher?
Aye.
Director Hunt?
Aye.
Director Olson?
Aye.
Director Powell?
Aye.
Okay, so next up, we have a Chromebook purchase authorization. Do you wanna talk about this a little bit first?
Yeah, so we put this on the agenda to have a very transparent conversation about not only the Chromebooks, but I think just in general where we're going with technology. The specific resolution is to purchase the Chromebooks for 6th graders and 9th graders that they would then keep as their one-to-one devices as they go through middle and high school. We've talked over the months, I guess, about the role technology plays in elementary school and trying to move away from technology in K2 and in 3-5, maybe just to a cart here or there if they need it, but not have it be a part of their everyday life. We haven't talked a lot about what that looks like in middle and high outside of the work that we're doing with the AI group in the Curriculum Review Council, but this is the time to have that conversation. I mean, we're getting ready to possibly spend $80,000 on a set of Chromebooks for 6th graders and 9th graders in a time when we're in a very severe budget crunch. These Chromebooks come in at about $277 a piece. that basically students use for either 3 or 4 years, and then it's not that they're useless, but from a value perspective, they're useless. We can't sell them and get anything back. We're not charging a fee for that. We're not allowing parents or students to bring their own devices to school. So we're really locked in, and this is not uncommon. Many districts did this with ARA funds years ago. Several did it with COVID funds, where you get this big infusion of one-time monies. You'd go to a one-to-one initiative, and then as you find out year after year after year, pumping $100,000 into this gets very difficult to do. So I think this is a great time, not only as we're kind of going back to basics, focusing on reading, writing, arithmetic, but also where we're at with the budget to really talk about what role do we want technology to play in middle school and high school. Do we still want a one-to-one initiative in middle school? Do we still want a one-to-one initiative in high school? And if so, do we want it at this cost? Do we want to talk about fees? Do we want to talk about allowing students to bring their own devices? So I've talked with Marty, Marty's talked with his team, so I've got information if you need it, but kind of we could open it up to a larger transparent discussion so that the community can hear what we believe, what role we believe technology should play in the education of our K-12 students.
Well, I know personally, I'd like to get some feedback from parents regarding what they want. I do like the idea of BYOD because, sitting in on the TAC meetings, I've heard some comments about, for some of the kids, it's, hey, how can I break this? Or, see if I can take this bezel off and put it back on. So maybe it's because of the sports phone and they have their own, which they prefer to be using. So this isn't taken as seriously, but I would like some feedback from parents regarding if they have that BYOD option, with the understanding that the tech team would not have to support the hardware on the device. If it's a matter of a student's having trouble logging in to the coursework, to the software, then that's something that could be supported. But I've also heard that a lot of time is spent struggling to get signed in, and it's wasting class time. So I think we need to look at the benefit of having them. Do they want them? Would they prefer to bring their own? And we still have the firewalls in place. So if the firewall's in place and someone tries to do something on their own laptop, the firewall should catch it. So
I question the value of a computer at all in these early grades. I took a physics class in college that didn't even allow you to use a calculator. So if I can do calculus-based physics without a calculator, I think our children need to expand their minds. And we can't do that if they are tied to a device. And with AI, we need to go back. We've got to go back. The computer, having access to the computer, allows them to basically offload all cognition to a machine. And the more we allow that, we're not teaching them anything. And I would challenge any lesson definitely below 9th grade, any lesson, why does that even need a computer? What is its purpose? I don't even think kids in elementary school should have a calculator, much less a computer. But I don't even think in middle school you need a calculator. I don't even think you need a calculator until you hit algebra 2, maybe trig. Trig, you need a calculator.
Just because you're so gifted in math,
Yeah.
David.
Let's remember.
We don't know how to use slide rules, so in order, it's either a calculator or trig tables, right? If we want our children to get better in math, we want them to get better in reading. You can't do that with a computer. It is a substitute for you and me. That's fine. we can offload some piece of the thinking to a computer or calculator, whatever, but we still know how to do it. They don't. The children do not know how to do these things, and the more you allow them to use the technology, the less they will learn. And that, there are so many studies at this point that have proved my point. Even in college, like as the professors move away from technology and they get back to a pencil and a piece of paper, the kids they're being more creative, they're learning, they're mastering their subjects, and I question the use throughout at this point, and that's my position. I know that I'm speaking for myself, but I think I have a dearth of scholastic proof to show, with data to show that these things need to be gotten rid of. So
I'm very interested in surveying parents and maybe even students and teachers to see what they all think about having this one-to-one policy in place. I particularly think 6th, 7th, and 8th grade are years where we probably don't need to be forcing a computer into the kids' laps, into the classrooms. Maybe there are a couple of classes where it would be helpful. Maybe we have that cart available to teachers who potentially need that for certain times of the year or exercises. But I just think there's a lot of distraction that can take place, especially with 6th graders and 7th graders and 8th graders. Distraction on the computer, using the computer, not knowing how to use a computer. And I also think that there's a lot of parents out there who would also like to see less technology at that middle school age level. I think there's probably a case to be made for the high school, but I also would question whether or not parents would be open or want to do a bring your own device to school. And if that's something that we could do, these kids are going to be able to continue using that computer for much longer than just the period of time that we loan it to them to use. And it would be something their parents could actually help them with too, right? A computer that their parents know how to use versus a computer that is owned by the school and maybe has different protocols or safeties in place. So all in all, I think we should hold off on placing any orders until we can do some surveys or at least know for certain how we're going to potentially, if we need a year to kind of figure it out, then maybe we can recycle some of the computers that have been returned to incoming students. But I would like to understand better what our community thinks is the right approach, particularly because we are facing the financial issues that we are.
I agree. First of all, I think we definitely should survey the parents and the teachers. I think some of them are probably would be happy to get rid of devices. I absolutely agree that I really believe for the whole K through 5 that we should not have technology going on at all. I personally believe K through 12 absolutely, 3 through 5 I believe absolutely also. I believe that middle school is also an area where I think we absolutely need to ratchet it back, if not have it at all. I have recently spoken to a parent who has a student who is very, very bright, and when I guess there are some games or something on these devices that are learning games, but they kind of feed the addiction to these kids. Their devices are an addiction. I mean, we all know that ourselves. We have to look at the phone continuously. We have to see what's going on the phone. We all know it for ourselves that can happen to us. Gaming is an addiction. But this parent I spoke to, her student was doing it during class because it was easy for him to keep up. He's very bright. And then it was such an addiction that they were finding out at home. He was kind of hiding under the covers and doing some stuff at home as well. It was becoming an addiction, and they caught it, luckily, and they are dealing with it, and kudos to them. But I'm sure that this student was not the only one where that is happening. It is absolutely an addiction, and we should not be reinforcing that. If we could, I agree with what you said, Nicole, about I really do think that we should hold off on ordering any more. This is a huge expense, and I just don't know that it's an appropriate expense at this point particularly, but really at any point, because we need to ratchet back on the technology, for sure. And high school, I think, to your point too, high school is kind of a different event. I mean, we have to prepare them for the real world, as they say. And it's not like they're not gonna be using devices at home. So it's not like gonna be, oh, what is this? I've never seen such a thing before when they get to ninth grade. They're gonna know, and they're gonna have stuff at home. As far as allowing their own devices, I mean, I think that's a definitely a survey question. I always feel bad for an IT department when they have to have students who are coming in with who knows what device. We will have a firewall, we will have different things, but we've kind of been talking about AI lately. We have to be sure that the AI controls, the AI walled garden that we talked about the other day, is in place, even if they're using their own devices. And so there's just a lot to consider with regard to allowing students to use their own device. On the other hand, it would save a lot of expense for the district. So there's a lot to consider, and I think a survey is definitely a way to start. Teachers and students, because the teachers would need to shift their mindset if they didn't have the technology. So there's a lot to consider, and I know that, where does that leave our teachers with right now? So we need to get a survey out probably sooner than later, but we may end up having to start the semester with, we're all gonna be a little bit less technology for now, and we'll revisit this in, at each quarter or something.
So I guess the question is, you have teachers, they have lesson plans, right now it's too late to just,
Rip it all away.
Yeah, that would be too traumatic, but this is something that needs to be planned, so I guess the question is, do we have enough that we can shuffle around and just buy what we need?
Yeah, so in talking with Marty and he got with his team, we have a decrease in enrollment, so we have fewer kids next year than we had this year. So we're going to have some extra devices no matter what. Let's say a sophomore left, that's an extra device. And we've got enough shifting around from elementaries. We could replenish 6th and 9th to get by one more year while we're studying this without having to go out and buy new Chromebooks. So we could keep the one-to-one in place in middle and high, not spend the money, survey, see where we're at, because yes, if teachers have their whole first semester planned through Google Classroom and everything laid out, and then we pull that away, we're asking them to build a house and taking their hammer away. Like, we've got to get them a different tool first.
So I guess maybe there's a survey, 2 surveys, one of our teachers and one of the parents.
Yeah, I think we've got to ask our teachers how much you use it, what would you need if this went away, like how much how much interaction do you have with your students on that laptop? And then parents, what level of technology do you really want your kids engaged with?
That's right, because I think even if there are a good number of middle school teachers who are using Google Classroom, I would question, maybe we ought not be using Google Classroom when we're in person with each other. I mean, I know we did that during COVID, there was, maybe not here, but I know schools in general did that during COVID, but when we're here at class together, maybe we don't need to be on Google Classroom in order to go over the material that we're learning at school that day.
Yeah, and we've already made that decision with like iReady, right?
Right.
The 15 minutes a day, K through 8, I believe it was, spent on literacy and math is, we don't want that. We want teachers instructing our kids during that time. We think our teachers are a heck of a lot better than a computer is at teaching our students. And so by that same token, it may be that we look back, and we are doing, as you know, a lot of work on curricular alignment and improving instructional strategies with literacy and math. So if we do start to pull that away, we could easily spend the year reinforcing other ways to not use technology and really get back to, I think, what most of us were doing before this craze kind of hit, which was just what ways make sense to integrate technology into the curriculum. Not that technology was the answer, but, years ago, right, when you wrote a rough draft and then you brought in the computer cart to type your finish, your final draft so it was polished. Where does technology make sense? And there's several different, there's the SAMR model, there's models that education has used for years to talk about where technology makes sense. and I can tell you, I think you guys know this, you're not the only school board having this conversation. I mean, this is a wave right now in education of a lot of us think we went way too far.
Silicon Valley
Is removing.
technology.
Yeah.
I mean, if that didn't tell you anything.
Well, yeah.
Right?
Now you can't get the technology.
Yeah.
Anyways,
They want you
yeah.
to have it, they want you and your kids to have
Just
it,
not
but they
their
were
kid.
limited from
Yeah, I
their
was just
classroom.
gonna say, maybe you could speak a little bit to the backlash, cause that, right, we talked about it being the craze, and so people would get this lump sum money and they invest into it. But what are you hearing now from the flip side of it as folks are reconsidering?
I think a lot of it is just this, we've now seen, I'm trying to think of a nice way to put this, we've now seen what happens to people who've spent their whole life on computers, right? Whether it's social skills, whether it's a lack of critical thinking because, or the addiction, just constantly needing that. I think as parents and educators, we've just seen that needle move way too far, and we're missing that. When I got into teaching, it wasn't necessarily about the curriculum, it was about that teacher-student relationship, and I think even technology has stopped some of that a little bit. It's probably, at least some level of causation, if not a correlation, that as technology integration has increased, test scores across this country have decreased. I don't think any teacher is as good at teaching the content as a teacher. You need that relationship. That matters. Teachers need to be able to, judge where a kid's at, use that computer to look at data to make instructional decisions, but not necessarily teach the kids. So, to me, ideally, the educator in me, I like the idea of no technology K2. I think kids should be reading and reading and reading and reading and playing. And I think 3-5, it might make sense occasionally to bring it in. We are going to have that discussion about what CMAS looks like. I believe the new rules are you can request, it's not automatic, you can request CMAS to be pencil and paper for 3rd and 4th, not for 5th. So I don't want to go so far that our 5th graders sit down to take a reading and math test in March or April. They not on a computer enough that it doesn't give us the data we need. It doesn't really show us what they know. It shows us that they don't know how to use technology. So there probably has to be some type of ramp up as kids get to 5th grade of at least making sure they understand how to use a computer to take CMAS.
That's easily taught.
Yeah, I think we can do that. It's almost more of an awareness.
Yeah.
We'll take some assessments on the computer leading up. Middle school, I taught middle school and I taught STEM where we had computers, and I tell you, back in the day, the kids enjoyed the non-computer things a lot more than the computer-based projects that we were doing. I think at the middle school and high school level, I really think we need to ask the kids. I think we might be surprised how much they don't necessarily value that computer as a learning tool. They use it for a lot of other things. I'm not sure how much they use it to extend their learning, but I absolutely love the idea of getting feedback from parents, students, and staff, and not spending the money right now. Continue kind of where we're going with middle and high, being honest and letting the staff know this is where we're likely to move to unless we hear data that's completely different, and we can start working through that and make that decision early enough that if we're going to remove one-to-ones in middle or in middle and high, that we would have the whole spring semester to do some professional development for our teachers who maybe have become pretty reliant on that technology.
So I want to just confirm my understanding at this point then. So we have already decided, and K through 2 at least for sure will have no technology.
That's my strong recommendation, and I've heard zero pushback from board or staff.
Okay.
I think most people are in agreement. Yeah.
And then third and fourth are probably dependent on whether we can get the CMAS waiver to do it with pencil and paper. But 5th grade, we would probably have to have something. And you've talked about this cart thing, so that's sort of like some ones that they can bring in, use for a day, and then take them away, and then they can be used by another classroom another day.
Exactly.
The same ones.
Yep.
And then right now you have said, so the ones that have been being used for K through 5, those are the ones that we can kind of redistribute for the 6th grade use this coming year, and 9th grade use.
And as well as just some extras we
And some
have.
extras, yeah. So that would take care of our cart situation, and that would take care of our 6th and 9th grade situation without buying any more new ones.
Correct, and it would also hold off, not on the discussion, but on the implementation of a bring your own device.
Yeah.
Because that is a big shift.
That
It
is
would
a big
give us
shift.
some time
Yeah.
to work
We need
with
some
our
time to work the
IT
details,
department,
yeah.
to work with parents, to create protocols and practices, because we wouldn't need it. And then if we decide, let's say we decide next spring, we only want one-to-one at the high school, and we don't want bring your own device, then we need to revisit where we come up with $300 per device. Is that a fee? What do we do? Because I think it's very difficult to continue to basically lease every middle and high school student a computer that's worth $300, and then they give it back to us and it's worth zero.
Yeah.
Um,
And then do we, I mean, like, when a senior graduates, do we actually get that device back?
we do,
And
and
that's
it,
what we've been kind of then taking down to the grade school, right?
a
To the
little
elementary
bit, but there's
Those
no
are- Those
value.
are really the hanger queens.
Yeah,
Those are really the ones that they use to fix the other ones.
school. Oh, yeah.
yeah,
They
there's
steal the
parts.
screens,
Parts,
they steal
yeah.
keyboards,
Like
they
new
steal.
screens and all
yeah,
that.
if we could, at that point, resell them for $100 or something, they have some use, but they have
But they have
zero
zero.
value
Yeah.
in terms of economics. And so I think that's a discussion we've got to have, is do we continue to, and we're gonna have a lot of those conversations tonight, do we continue to supplement some of these things through the general fund? Because you are robbing Peter to pay Paul, if we continue to do that.
And I guess I've always wondered how, correct me if I'm wrong, but do the middle schoolers, do they actually have it continuously when they take it home, or do they leave it at the school?
So it is one-to-one, but it's left at the school, where the
But in
night
high school,
they
they have
travel.
it, they travel back and forth. I always wonder how many really get back to where they're going, how many are lost in transit, how many are broken, how many throughout the year. I mean, how many do we lose and we have to replace?
Yeah,
And we do have this kind of graveyard of parts and pieces, I guess,
yeah.
but that's only gonna go so far.
Well, and
So-
middle school students, as you can expect, are pretty rough on those devices.
I can't imagine, I thought middle schoolers were so gentle.
Would just take care of, they are pretty rough. If we sent them home, I don't know that they would,
Yeah,
I don't know that when I was a 6th grade boy, if I'd have brought that thing back.
no,
either.
I don't think so. I'm just surprised any of them ever get back in, ever, personally, but anyway, well, I think this is a great
This is
way
a good
to,
plan.
don't buy them now, use the ones that we have for 6th and 9th, and consider this whole next year a surveying and making a plan for the next year.
Okay.
That's what I
I just have 3 really quick points. Maine is the first state to do this one-to-one, statewide. Yet the numbers, by any measure, do not add up to the money that's been spent to get these kids one-to-one, get a laptop, all by any measure, that has been a failure. The computer will only give you an answer. A teacher will force you to use your mind, which is what we need our kids to do. And the budget is a zero-sum game. You want to buy computers? Well, that's a teacher that you don't get to have. So I put that's pretty simple in my mind.
good point.
So no further discussion, we can do a roll call.
Director Fletcher,
Aye.
Well, wait, I'm gonna ask a question
do we need to
here.
verify the motion?
Yes, because the
Yes.
motion says we
Okay.
approve the purchase,
Yes.
is what the motion says.
Oh.
Sorry.
Would you like to change your answer?
It's nay.
We don't get to say nay very often. so.
Yeah.
We don't want to say nay very
Yeah.
often.
I thought it was the motion to not buy.
To not,
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Unless we want to amend the motion to the plan, or I could just take the plan forward and we can vote down the motion. Either one's the same. This
We've already
latter
done-
is the easier one.
We might as well just go for the voting down the
Just
middle.
vote this down.
Yeah, we'll just vote it
Okay, Director Fletcher,
down. Nay.
Director Hunt,
Nay.
Director Olson.
Nay.
Director Powell.
Nay.
My
And
first
who
solid no.
seconded- Who seconded that?
I did.
Okay.
I'm not
sure we did a first and second. Let's do that over
Yeah,
just in case.
We did it?
yeah, no, no.
I think I started.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think you did. Okay, all right. So, I move that the board approve the purchase of Chromebooks for the upcoming school year.
Now I don't wanna second it, Rhonda.
It's already written down.
I second that.
All right, we'll do this again. Director Fletcher,
Nay.
Director Hunt,
Nay.
Director Olson,
Nay.
Director Powell.
Nay.
Look at that, we gotta figure it out.
So we got to do it twice.
I know.
Parliamentarian, that's what we
I love it.
Okay, so next up, the
need.
20, yeah, go ahead.
You ladies are, I don't want y'all to think you're trapped here. If you need to go or whatever, you may.
They're
You're
probably
wel-
waiting
you're-
for this discussion
They're waiting for the
right
next
now.
one.
We're so excited.
I just didn't want y'all to feel like you're trapped.
We didn't know we locked the door. All right, so our 26-27 proposed budget and appropriation resolution. Do we wanna talk about this first before the motion? All right, you know what, let's, go ahead, I move that the board approve the 26-27 proposed budget and appropriation resolution. Can I get a second?
Second.
And discussion.
All right, so, I prepared a brief statement for everyone, so I ask you to bear with me, and I'm reading from my computer a little bit, so I apologize. But tonight, before I present the budget, I need to say something that is probably not very becoming of me as a superintendent. And that is I'm frustrated, actually, more than frustrated, I am angry. I'm angry because I do not believe that the situation that we find ourselves in today was inevitable. I believe many of the painful decisions before us could have been avoided had past leadership been transparent and addressed these concerns sooner. Over the past several months, there were repeated warnings about the district's financial condition. Multiple staff members raised concerns regarding our budget, our various spending commitments, the hiring decisions that we were being made, and our long-term financial sustainability. These concerns were raised through appropriate channels by people whose responsibilities included understanding the district's finances. Unfortunately, those warnings were not acted upon by past leadership with the urgency that they deserved. I know members of this board, including our board president, urged caution. There were requests to slow down hiring decisions, delay commitments, and wait until we had a clearer understanding of the district's financial position before making decisions with long-term consequences. Those concerns were continually met with assurances that the budget was sound and that there was no cause for alarm. Some may ask whether the board bears any responsibility in this situation, and I think that's a fair question. The board does have oversight responsibilities. The Financial Advisory Committee and the board treasurer had a responsibility to monitor the district's financial condition and to report any of those concerns back here to the board. However, and this is a big however that I hope this community understands, oversight only works when the information being provided is accurate. I've seen emails from board members requesting budget information, asking financial questions, seeking clarity regarding where the district was in its financial position. I've sat in meetings where that data was requested from the board to past leadership. Time and again, those requests were not met with complete information, but assurances that everything was fine and sometimes just flat out lies. The FAC and board treasurer both relied upon information that was provided by district leadership. The board then relied upon that information that was provided by district leadership, by the FAC, and the staff in the community relied upon that information that was provided by past leadership. The problem is that the information that was being provided was not an accurate reflection of our financial reality. I can say this because I personally witnessed board members being told that the budget was sound. I personally witnessed concerns by staff being minimized, and I personally witnessed requests for financial information being answered with assurances rather than data. Today, we obviously all know that those assurances were wrong. The The narrative that the board simply failed to act ignores a critical fact. Before action can occur, decision makers must have accurate information. When accurate information finally reached the board acted. Once the true extent of the financial situation became clear, difficult but necessary decisions began to be made. Likewise, staff members repeatedly raised concerns. Financial warnings were given, questions were asked. Some employees even continued to raise concerns when doing so was uncomfortable or unpopular because they knew that the district was headed towards a financial crisis. In some cases, many of those cases, those concerns were dismissed. In others, employees were actually discouraged from continuing to raise those concerns to levels where they thought they could get answers. So rather than confronting the problem, the focus too often became on controlling the message rather than solving the problem that was before us. This was not a situation where nobody knew. This was a situation where the people who knew were not listened to by a person who continually made the conscious decision to not face reality, to not choose transparency, and ultimately lead us to the situation we are in tonight. That is why I believe this crisis was preventable. As a result, we are now being forced to make decisions in the middle of the summer that affect people's livelihoods, their families, and their futures. These are conversations that could have occurred months ago, allowing employees more time, more certainty, and far more dignity than what this current process allows. I want to be clear about something tonight. The employees who are affected by these reductions did not create the problem. The board members who are now being asked to make these difficult decisions did not create the problem. The staff who sounded the alarm did not create this problem. Past leadership created this problem. And now we are being asked to deal with the consequences of decisions that should have been addressed much earlier. That is why I'm angry. Not because we have difficult decisions to make. Being a leader often requires difficult decisions. I'm angry because many of these decisions could have been made sooner with more transparency, more honesty, and especially more compassion for the people who serve the district every day. I want to close by saying that I do not enjoy talking about the past. Anyone who's worked with me knows that I'm not someone who likes to dwell on mistakes or assign blame. I believe in identifying problems, fixing them, and moving forward. But I also believe that people deserve the truth. The employees whose lives are impacted by these decisions tonight deserve the truth. The community and our taxpayers deserve the truth. And our board deserves the truth. The truth is that this situation did not develop overnight. Warnings were given, questions were asked, concerns were raised, and over again, opportunities existed to make different decisions that would avoid much of the hardship we're facing tonight. I felt it was important to say this publicly because accountability matters. Learning from failure matters, and if we are going to build trust, it has to start right here with honesty. Having said that, I'm not interested in spending the next year looking backwards. This is the first and last time I'll have this conversation. My focus will be on fixing the problem, restoring the financial health of the district, rebuilding trust with our staff and our community, and on making sure that we never find ourselves in this position again. What happened needed to be acknowledged, the truth needed to be told. The people who are going to be affected by these decisions tonight deserve that much. So now it's time to move forward. It's time to do the difficult work of repairing the damage, making responsible decisions, and building a stronger future for this district. The truth needed to be told. Now the problem needs to be fixed. That's exactly what I intend to do. With that being said, I would now like to take the board and the community through the budget revisions that the team and I have created in an effort to start to balance next year's budget. I think the easiest way to do that is to try and look at the two postings, the posting of the budget that was presented earlier on and the budget that was just presented. So as you kind of look at those, you'll get an opportunity to see the changes that the staff and I were able to make and I can tell you the internet's down, so this is gonna be fun because I don't have my Google Doc, but I think I remember it. I've spent a few hours on it. But I kind of want to just open this up to an opportunity. You guys have seen the original budget. You've seen the revisions that the team and I have made to bring you a balanced budget tonight. But I want to open it up for questions. Again, I think the staff, the community, our parents deserve to hear this transparent conversation about where we're at and the difficult decisions we're going to have to make in order to move forward.
It hurts. It hurts to look at.
So we're actually gonna hit our Tabor reserve this time.
So the budget that we've presented is hitting Tabor. That was our goal. It would be great to end with some extra unassigned fund balance. But yes, and that Tabor amount might be a little less because it's 3%, it's a percentage. But yes, the budget that we've created, that of course will continue to ebb and flow, but we'll actually monitor it and pay attention to that. That is the goal, is to hit Tabor. If we hit Tabor and have a penny left, I think we're in good shape when you look at the cuts that we've had to make in 1 year.
I appreciate what you just said, and I know all of y'all are here that I want the truth, no matter how ugly it is. Like, if I can't make a decision for our constituents if I don't have the truth. If it's being hidden from me, then I don't know what I don't know. So I'm not gonna shoot the messenger or anything else. Like, I don't care what it is. Just as long as I know the truth, then we can move forward and deal with it, and we don't have to. We may do a retrospective on how did we get here, but that's just to understand why, so we don't make that mistake again. But the truth will set you free.
So looking at this, one question that I have noted here is, so a single assumption that hurts most if you're wrong. So what is the single assumption that hurts most if you're wrong and your probability?
So I think the most difficult part of all of this is understanding the risks, right? We have a reduction in force, we have to reduce the number of staff that we have. We have tried very hard to go down to the penny to make sure we don't have to cut one more staff member than we have to. Your point of, do you wanna hit Tabor? Yes, if I hit Tabor and we've got $100,000 left at the end of the year, and that meant we didn't have to cut that one last person, that's something that would be difficult. We have tried to get this as close as we can, because as a lifelong educator and former teacher myself, it's hard to find a job at the end of June. That's why you make these decisions early. The decisions we're making tonight are very difficult. And so we have literally, this team has spent hours amongst hours looking at exactly what benefits someone took. We're not using averages, we're looking real numbers, so that we try to get as close. I mean, I'm getting numbers every day. Here's the checks that cleared, here's the money that came in. We are watching this like a hawk because you don't wanna have to cut one more person than you have to. And so to me, we can't make a mistake on that. We've gotta be as close as possible. So if we end up with Tabor and $1, someone might say, why didn't you have more? Because we don't wanna cut any more staff. So that would be.
So other than RIFs, what other areas got cut to balance this?
So there's kind of 3 areas we looked at. There were positions that we just simply did not refill. If we knew we had a teacher retiring and maybe the class size coming up was lower, we made some decisions early on things like recess paras, and instead using staff to do that. We chose not to rehire a CFO, a CAO, positions like that. So those were reductions, but they weren't legally a reduction in force because we made those decisions before contracts came out. We also did some transfers, so if we had an opening at one school and an overage at another, we simply moved people around. So that people kept their, you might have been driving to Singing Hills and now you've gotta drive to Running Creek, but your job stayed intact, your benefits, your pay. So when you look at the total cuts that we made, and I will pull it up so I get the numbers exactly right here. When you look at those reductions, we reduced $2,517,127,000 of total comp. So that's salary and benefits. In transfers, we don't necessarily count those as a savings because they're already counted in the reduction, but we transferred several people. So it allowed us to not have to reduce as many employees because we were able, and I tell you, I have to thank not only the ladies in finance and HR, but all of our directors and building leaders who I've never seen a group of people more flexible, just willing to do whatever, conversation after conversation, phone calls on vacation, late night texts. Hey, I'm looking at this person, what's this salary, what do they do, could we reduce from 4 teachers to 3 teachers? And then as those leaders went and talked to teachers, the flexibility of our teachers to say, yep, if you can't rehire this person, the 4 of us that are left will each work a little harder. Like, you don't normally see that, but I think everybody realizes A, the situation that we're in, and B, that they don't want to see their colleagues cut. So really everybody in this district has stepped forward, they've been flexible. Numerous people in this room have taken on extra roles next year. So this is what happens when you have to cut. Everybody takes on an extra role. We're seeing that in schools, we're seeing that with leaders. So overall, we are looking at a total of $3,150,000 in total comp cuts. From last year into this year. That is a significant amount of money and a significant amount of people. And again, we only got that done because of the work of our staff really digging deep, this team finding the actual numbers, our leaders being courageous and having conversations, and then our staff members being willing to step up and maybe take on extra roles, take a little bit larger class, whatever it is, to try to save as many positions as we could. But when you decrease in enrollment and you increase in expenditures, something's gotta give. And in a school district where 80% of your money is staffing, you don't foundationally change your budget unless you change structures, which is usually staffing.
81%.
Yeah, it's.
81% of the budget is salary.
Yeah, you can only, cut down on paper towels and save so much money. It's got to be staffing, unfortunately.
So with this, deferred maintenance, so there's not much left.
No, and there hasn't been.
Yeah, well, that's just kind of the way it's been forever, it's just, we're lean, and you have to put your priorities, which is into the people. What do you foresee the probability of having something come up? I know we're sitting on a well. The other issues that we have as far as deferred maintenance goes, are we gonna be able to address those?
So one of the things that we're gonna do a little differently is when you get impact fees, improvement fees, different, fees that builders and individuals have to pay that allow us to help repair district facilities, that money is supposed to go away into a capital facilities fund that's kind of locked away, right? It is a reserve account that should not be touched. In my research over the past couple years, we have constantly used that to backfill the general fund, which is what happens when you have too many staff or you spend more money than you're bringing in. You've got to pull from somewhere. We've used that along with other areas as a savings account. We have built a budget that allows us to live within our means and keep that capital reserve account. So as those fees come in, they won't all come in day one, but we're anticipating somewhere between $750,000 and $800,000 $800,000 should come in over the course of 26, 27. If we're truly living within our means, we shouldn't have to transfer that money to the general fund to make up for other areas. So we should be able to start rebuilding that and have that savings account for capital facilities. Now, I think that's different, and sometimes school boards, and you guys have done it before, will say, well, we want a 10% reserve. You have to understand that money would be earmarked. So if we say, I want $1.5 million in reserves so we have a month of payroll in case something happens, you don't get to count the $800,000 you have in facilities. That should be earmarked. There's a difference. You guys have heard me talk about assigned and unassigned reserves, and I think we've used those a little too interchangeably. We would have an assigned account just for capital reserves. We shouldn't touch it unless they are capital projects. We should be aiming for separate reserves for things like a month's payroll in savings. We should have $800,000, we should have more, but $800,000 in the capital reserve fund. We should also be aiming to get a month of salary and benefits in a separate, reserve for us. So we are working through it. Our maintenance and operations team, I think, have done a really good job of trying to get things done on a shoestring budget. We've had a lot of conversations lately with different partners as people want to partner with us. We can make this budget work. We can increase student achievement. It's really hard to get chunks of money for capital. So as community partners have come forward, we've been saying, what can you do for us, in terms of capital? I know Nicole has had some great ideas of working with the town and the county in terms of what we can do to make sure we're getting the appropriate amount of fees in from builders. Again, I don't think we live in a community where the average person wants to raise their taxes for everybody for a few people who have bought a new house. So we have to use those impact fees, and we've got to make sure they are the appropriate amount. You guys had a demographer in here, I believe, earlier this year who suggested raising the cash in lieu amount. Those are things I think we've really got to start looking at is, are people coming into our community, are they giving us the fees that we need to actually sustain our facilities, or are more people going to kind of, put more wear and tear on our facilities and we're not getting any more money? Because that $12,000 we're getting per pupil funding from the state, really like for that to be able to go to teaching and learning, not supplement capital.
I have a question, and this kind of goes back to your beginning statement, but I think it's just worth spending a little time to talk about it. As we're looking at this new budget, looking back at the last one, what were some of the decisions or assumptions or even failures that were made that created the crisis that we're in? And I've heard you talk about, the enrollment loss. I've heard you talk about the inability to kind of right size once that happened and overspending. But can you maybe just kind of summarize it so that our community can understand how did we get here? Because I think understanding those red flags is going to be really important for us as we're walking into next year to make sure that none of that happens again.
I think a bit of a perfect storm. You've got a lot of other districts right now that are struggling financially. I think you have a lot of districts that are coming down off of a COVID high, right? You had a lot of extra one-time monies infused in public schools. Those are gone, and you have to cut those positions after that money goes. We have grant funds, and after those grants leave, you've got to decide, are you then going to to keep those employees? So Tyler did a great job of explaining, we're not doing matching, we're not doing things where 2 years from now after the grant's gone, we've got to pick up the salary. Though we've got to start looking long-term and not just short-term. We didn't right size. We've continued to lose student after student. You guys were told that, this is my opinion, I don't think you guys were properly illuminated as to the impacts of having one of our charter schools increase enrollment by adding a teacher at nearly every grade level the same year we opened up a new charter. When you look, one of the biggest differences, and I thank Ron for pointing this out, between the initial budget that the past superintendent presented and the one we just presented, is no one changed the charter allocation. I don't know why we would think we could lose 150 kids to Legacy and ICA and that wouldn't increase our allocation to charters. We have to give 97% of the money to them. So every kid that leaves one of our neighborhood schools and goes to a charter, and this is difficult for, I think, a community like this, a board of like you guys, and a superintendent like me that 100% believes in parental choice in education. We still have to face the fact that if 200 students choose to leave our neighborhood schools and go to those other choices, we may personally think good for those parents. They were able to make the choice for their kid. But at the same point, we have a fiduciary responsibility to understand what that does to our district. And when you lose those 200 kids, I mean, the allocation that was not changed to legacy alone was, I believe, $1.8 million. We had to cut an additional $1.8 million in the last week and a half because that allocation is going to change when they get more kids. Because most of those kids are coming from our neighborhood schools. And so you have a lot of things like that where we brought in competition, which again, we may personally agree with, but we have a responsibility to understand how that impacts the schools that we have. If you lose 150 kids, just in general, if you think 25 kids to a classroom, wouldn't you think we should cut 6 teachers? Before I bring those teacher contracts to you, and before I suggest raises, and before I say you've got to pass these contracts today, we've got to know, might you not stop and think that, wait, we probably need less staff if we have 150 less kids? Those types of decisions, and I can't for the life of me understand why those things were not shared. Those have put us in this position today because again, we could have cut those 6 teachers. We knew this was coming for months. We could have cut those 6 teachers before they ever had contracts. We could have non-renewed people who were in their first or second year. We could have done a lot of things that valued our employees. We're making all these last minute decisions because we weren't transparent, or we didn't understand the budget, or something. Maybe we did need a calculator, David, I don't know. The math ain't mathin', and so.
It's called a spreadsheet.
Yes, it's in there. It wasn't very accurate. There were, I mean, again, I don't want to dwell too much on the past. There were a lot of mistakes. And I don't know how many of those mistakes were lack of transparency, how many of those were lack of understanding. I, for the life of me, can't understand some of the assumptions that were made. And that's just this year. When you look at the audit over the past couple years, I mean, we've been overspending every year. Tonight with the budget, you get an appropriation resolution. That is where I'm asking you to basically allow us to spend the money in those areas. I believe last year's appropriation was overspent by like $6 million. The budget itself was overspent by 2. It's just, you can't keep doing that. I've explained your own personal finance thing. If you're bringing in $1,000 and your bills are $1,200 and you got $1,000 in the savings account, come month 6, you're in trouble. And we hit month 6. Everything hit. We had a fund balance here, I believe, of like 1.8 million, and I might have these numbers off a little bit, and it dropped to like 800,000, and then last year negative 131. Those things should have been brought to you. The truth should have been told. Our staff should have known. Our community should have known. Instead, we sat up here and said, yes, we met Tabor. No, we didn't meet Tabor. Tabor was $800,000. We put $600,000 and a $131,000 IOU on a bar napkin in the account and tried to say we met Tabor. It's a lie. We didn't. And so we are in this position because of poor leadership.
And one of the things I heard you talk about was just accuracy in numbers. What kind of confidence do you have that the numbers that we have in this budget now are accurate?
So the ones that we've seen, I feel very comfortable with. When you look at salaries, they are straight out of our system. When you look at benefits, it's exactly what people ask for. Many of the assumptions that were made here were inaccurate, and the staff here was able to go in and say, no, let me look at the last couple years and let's actually see, because some of the numbers, they didn't make any sense to some of us. We were like, well, what'd you put 130,000 there for? So for example, the transfer to Fund 23 athletics, you'll see is 585,000. In the initial budget, it was 500,000. Tracy actually pulled up Fund 23 and we actually looked how much will we have to transfer out of the general fund to actually balance the budget? So these are real numbers. Some of the things we don't know finishing out 25, 26 is what's still going to come in. We've had some pretty loose spending rules that we are going to tighten up. We're getting in some receipts, some reimbursements. We're hearing some things that all of us are like, yeah, that's not how you do it, but they've been allowed and there hasn't been accountability. So we still have some expenditures coming in that we're working through. There's still a lot of promises, as you guys know, that have been made that we're working through. So the expenditures to finish out this year, we're still watching very closely. But when you look at the numbers that we're putting in for next year, I think they're as close as you can get right now. They'll obviously change over time. I keep joking, I got the budget balanced at 0, right? We had Tabor and like nothing left over. Michelle puts in a new hire, the new hire decides to take benefits when the employee they replaced didn't take benefits, and now I'm $9,000 in the hole again. And so this is going to change daily, but we're actually looking at it daily, so we're going to know. So I feel very confident that the numbers that we have, what's going to be interesting moving into next year is when you look at the revenues there at the top, we're going to have to look up true up. Those revenues that the state gives us on the spreadsheet are based on enrollment, and we know we're probably going to be about 200 kids down. So those revenues there are going to most likely drop. Now there are some averages that the state lets you use where you don't lose all your enrollment in 1 year, but if we don't improve academics, improve budget, improve our reputation, get the chaos out like you guys are doing, we're gonna continue to lose kids, and those averages, we're just gonna continue to bleed staff. We turn this around and I think we'll start getting kids back, and then we're not gonna lose staff. And so if we follow this and we continue to update it as we get the real numbers, I feel confident that we are as close as we've been in a long time probably.
That's good. At what point do you think we'll kind of be through the residual effects of this year's budget, where we're still trying to figure out, what other expenses are going to potentially be impacting us further?
I would probably say we'll probably get a month or so in the school year, and then some of these things will get journaled back to 25, 26. As it sits right now, 25, 26, we're estimating, maybe $800,000 cash on hand. It's different than fund balance. Once all the things that have to be accounted back to 25, 26, we'll most likely, I believe, probably end up in the red, which means we won't meet Tabor. I mean, if the day ended today with our fund balance, we'd barely meet Tabor if we met it at all. But we still have a lot of things that'll get journaled back to 25, 26. But I would guess sometime late summer, early fall, we'll have a better accounting. And then of course we'll have, the audit that'll come out and tell us, later in the winter exactly where we were at. But we've kind of been watching, when you look at the past budget, our goal was hit June payroll, which we're going to do, again, thanks to, I don't know that we would have, but thanks to the hard work of these ladies, like watching every dime, and when do we send this out, when do we pay this, when do we hold that, we'll be able to make June payroll, and that was our goal, and really then shifted our efforts to this, making sure we hit July and August payroll. The interest-free loan isn't available until, late August, 1st of September. So we've got to make sure we're creating a budget where we hit July and August payroll. So that very quickly, once we knew June payroll was going to be okay, moved to July and August payroll.
I have a couple of questions about a couple of specific numbers on the expenditure page. So number one is on the technology line, 628. So the 25-26 expenditure said 149,000. For 26-27 it says 74, with a reduction in expenses of 75,000. So now considering that tonight we just voted to basically not buy Chromebooks, is that like sort of a assumption that we were not gonna buy the Chromebooks, or was that something else?
It was. We don't get another 80-some thousand off
I
of
was
that.
just hoping for another
I
80,000.
had
I was
a feeling-
trying,
I had a feeling we may go that way,
Yeah,
and
so-
so and again had had I felt during that conversation the board was gonna go the other way, I might have had to say, just so you know, we don't have the $80,000. If you wanna purchase those, I'm gonna have to go back and redo the budget.
Okay, well, thank you,
This-
I thought, but I
This
just
is the
wanted to
fun
clarify
part about doing all of our business in public, is
Yeah.
you guys find out when everybody else
that.
does.
Yeah,
I had already cut that and a
Okay.
few other
and
things.
that's fine, I just wanted to be sure.
Yeah.
So I make that plain. And then my other question relates to the unassigned fund balance line. So the 25-26 budget says we had a $1.6 million fund, unassigned fund balance, and then now we've got the $1,677. So just, if you could just, how did we, what was unassigned that we could all, that all of a sudden that number is so much lower? Just, work me through that if you would.
So it's just lack of accuracy. I mean, part of when you look at the whole budget, that amended budget, assuming we were, and again, we heard it all year long, right? We're gonna end with 2 million, we're gonna end with 4 million.
I mean, I remember that number.
Yeah,
1.6 million.
it was faulty assumptions, it was numbers in here that were just flat out wrong, things that weren't accounted for. There were areas in here where we literally budgeted, I don't know, $900,000, and we knew it was gonna cost us 1.5 million. I'm like, why wouldn't we just put it in there if we know that's what it is going to cost us? So there were areas that were under budgeted. There was money that, quite honestly, was moved around in a shell game, that was moved from one area to the other. It was very hard, and I had a great conversation with Tracy at one point where I'm like, Tracy, how do I rectify this budget? She said, start at zero. Like, don't bother going there. And it's true, as we've gone along the line, it just hasn't been, we didn't adjust revenues at true up, so some of that should have dropped. That was, another, I think, over $1 million error. There's a lot of errors, a lot of faulty thinking, and lack of accuracy, I think, in some of this, or lack of truthfulness and transparency. We may never know the answer to some of those.
So one thing that may come up, and I can see it on here because, like special services, if it's what I'm thinking that it is, it's always been.
Special ed, GT,
Yeah,
ELL.
it's been
Yep.
exorbitant, but there is a substantial reduction. Can you explain how that's being achieved?
Yes, so the initial proposed budget showed special education, special services costing us about $5 million. That is a huge chunk of change, especially when MOE, maintenance of effort, right? The government basically says you need to spend about the same amount on special ed every year as you did the last year, unless you've shown a reduction in students who have disabilities, was about $4 million. We were able to sit down, Lene did a great job of looking and saying, where can we cut and still make sure that student needs are being met? A lot of that was in paraprofessionals. I think Lene inherited a culture, and now I have as well, where maybe the answer out of a lot of IEP meetings was we just need a para, we just need another adult. I think the original budget for Singing Hills showed 14 paras. I've never seen that in my life. So we've made some significant cuts in paras. Those are oftentimes cuts that a lot of districts will make. They hurt, they're real people, they do a great job with kids, but they get added into IEP meetings when they might not be a necessity. We also had situations where we had a social worker at every building. We were able to go back to, let's just have 2 social workers, and maybe, one can do the middle school in Singing Hills, one can do the high school in Running Creek. We also have counselors, we have school psychologists. We had the HMC program at Running Creek, where I think we were spending, several $100,000 on a program for 3 kids.
What was that, HMC?
HMC, Happy Mediums, something like that. It was a program that was brought here by past leadership, and it literally had probably $300,000 or $400,000 of salaried employees in there for 3 kids. So we were able to move away from that. Those kids are definitely supported very well in our center-based programs at a significant reduction to the district. So yeah, I would point that out as well, Director Olson, because those are our students who are our most needy. We absolutely have to make sure we're giving them everything we need, and they will and more. You guys have heard me talk a lot about the program we're putting in place at Running Creek. That is not expensive. We will make sure we don't overstaff students into special education. We have about 20% of our kids on an IEP. That is not accurate. 20% of our kids do not have a learning disability, so that it impacts their education so much that they need an individualized education plan. I would bet money on it.
We may have given them a learning disability by using computers.
By using computers, very good.
Calculators.
You never know. Too much calculator use. But as we improve our tier 1 instruction, as we actually create an RTI/MTSS system, we will be limiting the number of students we staff into special education and hopefully staffing students out as we demonstrate that they are at grade level. And so it is a significant chunk of money. I think when you look at contractors, salaries and benefits, and just departmental spend, I think she cut about $900,000. So a huge amount. That really, it's again, you have so many funds here where we were supplementing with the general fund, where you just can't do it all. So that is now, I think, more in line. And then as we do a better job with tier 1 instruction, get kids staffed out of SPED, we might not need that much spend in the future. So I feel 100% confident that we have made the right cuts there. I feel 100% confident that students with an IEP and without an IEP will thrive more moving forward than they ever have, or I certainly would not have recommended or even approved myself those cuts. But a lot of them, I want to say, it's on here, I mean a huge percentage of those where we cut 12 paras because we were just, let me look real quick so I get the numbers right. Yeah, $390,000 in the reductions were 12 paras. And I've seen other systems do that. They just think, a para is the answer. And if we give this kid a para, it'll help. I've rarely found that to be the case. And
So how many paras were we, and which, was this at Running Creek or all together?
No, this was at Singing Hills.
Singing
We had 14, I think. We're down now to like 6 or 7 at each school, which I think is a more reasonable number. We have center-based programs at each one of our schools. We have some students who do need a one-on-one para, maybe for medical necessity needs or things like that. We're at a much more reasonable rate. But when I first got here as academic systems consultant, there were times I walked in special ed classrooms where there were more adults than children. And that's just, I don't think that's best practice. I don't think that's the best way to spend our limited amount of funds. And so that's another area we've right-sized. And Lene has done a great job of leading that effort.
And is that also helped by that we have kind of centered kind of the more severe needs into kind of one school and the less severe needs? Isn't that what we've done, is sort of separated them out a little bit because the staffing needs are different?
So we've spread the programs out. So we'll have an affective needs class at Running Creek. We'll have an SSN class at Singing Hills. The middle school has both and the high school has both. But again, even those
efficiency
yes,
to the staffing for those.
Correct. And even those programs, as we continue to grow in our academics, we will probably have some of those students. We want students in the least restrictive environment possible. You don't want to put a kid in a center-based program unless they have failed with multiple interventions in a general ed classroom. So hopefully as we improve some of our other classrooms, we can even move some of those kids out of a center-based classroom back out with their peers. If you have a kid who's leaving a center-based classroom and they're out with their peers and they need a one-to-one para, that actually might make some sense. But to have 6 kids in a center-based classroom and then give all 6 of them a para, it just doesn't make sense. It's not a good use of our funds.
So
one more question. So there's quite a decrease in curriculum and instruction. So what does that consist of?
So we cut Kim Moore's position as chief academic officer. We didn't replace my consulting position. And then we cut a lot. Now we did increase the math coordinator. So it's not I wanna make sure we're transparent, showing both sides. We cut an employee and a contractor. We added added an employee. But a lot of it is in department spend. We were spending money on outside consultants. We were spending money on outside software programs, iReady, things like that to me are not needed. You've heard me say, as I presented some of the other plans, we have the expertise within the staff. The distributed leadership team is a much better place to put our money and our time and our effort into allowing our own people to help each other. And so it's a decrease in giving money to outsiders that were intended to come in and help us grow our scores and obviously did not. We can do that ourselves internally much better and much cheaper. So a lot of that is external costs that we were paying outside people to come in and do work.
So Kim's salary was included in the curriculum and instruction expenditure line?
It's let me see which one you're looking at, because you'll see
Line
staffing.
610 on expenditures.
So the one that dropped from 300,000 to 60,000?
Yeah.
That is not the staffing. So that is just in stuff we quit buying.
Stuff you quit buying, and is that like the consultants and things, does that get rid of them too?
Correct.
But and your consultant fee is in there or not?
No, that you would see in the other file on staffing where we cut some of those positions. So what you're looking at, and the way these are set up is you get a salary and benefit expenditure, so that's salary and benefit, but then the expenditures by location, that's the stuff, I guess you would
Stuff.
say. Yeah.
That was a lot of stuff
Yeah.
that I would like to see some detail on some.
Absolutely, yeah, I can print that out and get it to you guys. Yep.
Because, we were worried about what we were gonna do for this year for a couple of things and.
Yeah, there was,
With the iReady contract.
iReady contract was
Oh, yeah.
in there.
That was probably pretty big.
Yeah, that
But then we
was,
still have enough for new math curriculum.
Yeah, do we still have?
so that's what I've got left in there. I don't know that we're gonna be able to afford to buy much more.
So that is what that $60,000 is for.
That is what I would suggest we spend it on. Yes, it could be for any number of things, but that would be my suggestion. I don't see a lot of other curriculum needs that we have.
Not this year.
There's a couple, we're doing changing assessments, right, to Dibbles, but we got the CLAC grant to do some of that. So we're also going to some more research-based materials that the state supports that we can get grant money for. And so we're able to save some money there and still do some of the other expenditures. But a big chunk of that is what I would consider contracts for stuff. But I can get you that breakdown.
Where's all of the printing that we usually have a whole lot of that in the first half of the year? Sometimes it's curriculum related, but just for classes and things like that. Would that fall under each individual school's allocation?
So when you look at their, again, not the salary and benefits, but the expenditures by location,
Yeah.
they get an allocation for how many students they have. In that fund, so like Running Creek, $270,000, you'll see something for their copier, you'll see something for supplies, you'll see their workers' comp insurance, like you name it, it's all throughout there.
So we don't have to worry about that being cut from the curriculum line since it's already
Correct,
accounted
it is
for.
out in schools, yeah. And most districts did this a few years ago. They tried to take most of their centralized spend and put it out in the schools where it's actually being spent, because otherwise it looked like, why are you growing administration?
Mhm.
Why isn't the money out in the schools? And so we've changed a lot of our accounting codes over the years to try to demonstrate where that money is actually being spent. It's still not all perfect, but it's much closer.
So another question I have is on 623, expenditures by location, Board of Education, $191,000. We're
Yes.
gonna get accused again of all of a sudden voting ourselves a salary, so please describe that.
Well, that's because you only have 4 board members now, so I only
Yeah,
had
so
to
we
divide
only got
salary
a
by
raise,
4.
25% raise.
Yes. No, you'll notice there is no
25%
Board of
zero.
Education under salary and benefit expenditures. The board expenditure is anything from CASB fees to election costs. I'm trying to
And
think.
when you say that, I'm just gonna clarify,
No, but
that's
this
the
is,
fees that we have to pay for having our names on a ballot for the whole, that's all that is,
Election.
we do not
We're not
do not
supplementing your.
supplement
No.
our campaigns, just
No.
saying that.
No,
Put that
yeah.
clear.
If we put people on the ballot, we've gotta pay.
Yeah, we have to pay,
we
we
have
have to
to
pay
pay
our
for
share
that.
of the election fees, yes.
Correct.
Just wanted to clarify that.
Yes, no, that's a good clarification.
Yeah,
We
so,
have to
okay.
answer that on the horse's mouth tomorrow.
There we go.
So, better to do that here, but you have that, I'm trying to think what other, there's 5 or 6 line
Okay.
items on there. If there's any travel reimbursement, sometimes boards will wanna go to,
Like a training or
to like a
something.
training, if we wanted to bring someone in to train the board, those types of things. There are some, I don't know, general supply line items in case you guys need something. But to me, yeah, we dropped that, it's a very reasonable amount for a
I just
board in
never-
the district.
Wanted to clarify, because that was gonna come up, I know.
And actually, while we're on the topic of that line item, I think it's worth it for you to potentially take a look at all of our membership organizations that we are a part of, that we pay to be a part of. Cause I for one would like to understand how much we're paying for that, if it's something valuable to us as a board, if it's not, I think it's worth reconsidering our membership.
Okay, yep, I could, the only one I have budgeted for next year is CASB. And a lot of that is not necessarily because the board needs it, but the board clerk, Jamie, needs it to be able to get some support on if the legislature changes policies, for her to have to go through and research all that, get legal review. It is well worth CASB sending those out, and then all we have to do is tailor them to our community. And so
That's a huge benefit.
yeah, in my experience, that's probably more for the board clerk than the actual board, but it goes under your budget.
But it's also a good place, I mean, they have a lot of model policies, and we are going to edit them,
Correct.
many of them at least.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a place to start
Start,
instead of
start.
starting from scratch, and that's, for
Absolutely.
the board, that's invaluable too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then in that case, I know that we've been a part of class, we are a part of class right now, but I don't know when it's up for renewal or how much it would be to, or even if the board wants to continue to be a part of that organization. So if you would look into that so that we have, can make an informed decision moving forward.
Yes, I can look that, I can tell you, I did not put that in the budget, so if the board would want that to come back, I can certainly do so. I put CASB in there because they're the ones that help us
Yes.
with board policies, and that's what we've needed.
Yes, thank you.
so it looks like transportation has gone up quite a bit.
So,
Was it under before and it's just right size?
So transportation is, as it sat on the original budget, and I think this is another one that's definitely worth having a public conversation about. We spend on salaries and benefits as well as expenditures about $2 million a year in transportation. We only bring in just under 500,000, so it's a $1.5 million transfer from the general fund. This next part that I say, I just say for clarity's sake, for a expenditure that legally we don't have to provide. We have to provide transportation for students in special education if it's in their IEP as a related service. We do not have to provide transportation. I'm not saying we shouldn't, I'm saying some districts don't. I happen to think we've got to shrink that delta somehow. That 1.5 million is too big of a general ed or general fund transfer. Jeff Canella, our transportation director, has done a great job kind of, I think, changing the mindset. He did a wonderful job with the Stampede. We were able to help out the community. We didn't lose money, that's a plus. He's done a great job trying to get some of this lined up, but there's only so much you can do. I also know that, and I agree with this philosophically, I'm not sure I can support it monetarily. We've provided, basically free transportation for our charters. I think that is really probably difficult when you're looking at a budget. We're not even charging them for field trips. And again, if we were flush with cash, I think I'd be okay with that because, you know, we're all trying to help out all the kids in our community. But when we don't have any money and we're transferring this much of a general fund, I think we have to have a hard conversation about what transportation looks like moving forward. That could be reduced service. It could be not, you know, transporting charter school students anymore. It could mean charging every student who takes transportation a fee. Many surrounding districts charge a transportation fee, not to every student, but the students who use it. We need a long-term solution that this board can support, that this community can live with, because it's just such a huge expense. And I think transportation's done everything they can. We've got great partnerships with the city and the police department, and I think we bent over backwards to try to be everything to everyone, but that's expensive. We're not appropriately charging from an accounting perspective, even our own schools, right? If we transport the football team from here to La Junta, somehow or another that accounting needs to come out of athletics versus transportation, because we need to know how much we're actually spending on athletics. As you see, athletics is another one, $580,000 transfer. We need to take an honest look at, are we charging the right athletic fees? Because we keep, again, you've heard me say, general fund is supplementing. So we have to look at, are several of these areas, are we getting what we need? Do we need to increase fees? Do we need to decrease service? So yes, transportation, we've looked at everything we can do. We've got, I believe, 12 general ed routes. We've got a handful of special education routes. We have a couple students that we have by law to transfer to schools that more meet their academic needs. So there are some things we have to do, but we also do some things we probably don't have to do. Kids are on the bus for a long time because we make a lot of stops. Maybe we do fewer stops in the future. We shuttle kids back and forth from Legacy to the high school. That creates more wait time, and it's also something that I don't believe we're getting reimbursed for. So, and again, this isn't an anti-choice and anti-charter conversation, but we've been giving away the farm on some of these deals, which again, when you asked earlier, how did we get to this point? Well, I don't think we've always negotiated from a point of strength, and I think sometimes we've let our philosophy get in the way of good business. And at the end of the day, something like transportation is a business.
Well, and to be clear, this board, when we agreed to transport charter school students, it was presented to us, and we understood it as it would be no extra expense to the district.
We're going by there
Just
anyway.
gonna go to the stops that were already there. And then over this last year, I've heard some parents talking about how long their kid has been on the bus. Is that contributing to that time that they're on the bus?
I think there's a couple things that are contributing to it. One, you've got to be able to line up all your start and end times if you're doing multiple stops. If the bus that takes kids from the middle and the high school out to their neighborhood is waiting on the shuttle, I don't know if they are, I'm just saying hypothetically if they were, that could increase wait time. If we did have to add more stops, or didn't eliminate stops because we've got a lot of kids getting off, all of those things could increase wait times. And so
I've heard that the Legacy was unwilling to negotiate their let out time in order to.
I have heard that that was a difficult conversation. I did meet with them today and said that depending on what happened today, we would have to look at starting end times. I did not get any pushback. I have heard that wasn't always the case, but I did not today.
My understanding too is, on Thursdays, now we aren't gonna have this next year, but on Thursdays, we've had up to this point, we've had late start days. And my understanding from somebody at Legacy is that on those days, Legacy's students weren't transported by bus because they, you know, they don't have a late start day. So that was kind of interesting that they could work it out for one day.
Well, my priority is the kids that are going to the 4 schools and their transportation. If there was a way that we could make it work that would not inconvenience and keep the kids on the bus longer or cost the district money, then I would be okay, but we have to prioritize.
We're in here making hard budget decisions.
Yeah, that's a pretty easy one.
Yeah, we've got to, my understanding, I mean, we have room on the bus and I can understand the philosophy, right? There's 5 seats empty on the bus, let's just put these 5 kids on.
They can go to an existing stop.
They can go to an existing stop. What I don't know is, well, what if it was 6 kids? Did we add another route? Like, I do know Jeff is working right now to try to figure out, are there any routes that have any efficiencies in them at all? I can tell you, having done a little work in this area, that's difficult to do the more kids you have riding the bus. Does every bus need to be the full, 60, 70, person bus? Could we save money if we had, some of the smaller buses, because we might have smaller routes going out to the outskirts of, of our boundaries? I think it's a conversation we've got to have, because again, long term, and when you look at it, and again, I look at all of this in a rob Peter to pay Paul. I mean, every dollar you save is a dollar we could put to teaching and learning. It's a dollar we could put towards staff salaries. We need to recruit and retain the very best staff there are. It's tough to do that when I'm, transferring 1.5 million out of the general fund to transportation and 580,000 to athletics, and right, I could go on and on. These are all, and I think some of the decisions that have been made in the past, we didn't always tell people that, like, oh, you want this? That's a great idea. However, it's going to be at the expense of this. You needed that second piece of information that I'm not always sure you got.
And if you want this and we don't want to cut that, this is going to be what it's going to cost.
Correct. This is the fee, right? It's like the computers, right? Okay, if everybody comes back and says we want 1-to-1 at the high school, okay, do you want 1-to-1 at $300, your freshman year? Some of these things if we're not going to increase taxes, which as I said, I cannot in good conscience ask our taxpayers for another dime, we might have to use fees for use. Not fees for everybody, but if you're going to play sports, we need to look at the sports fee. If you're going to ride the bus, we might need to look at a bus fee. If you need a computer, we're going to look at a computer fee. I just feel like we've been the central bank and the expenditures just keep building and the revenues aren't coming because we're losing enrollment. And so we're just swirling down the drain on some of this stuff.
So how are we, like the transportation and the sports, how are we doing it versus the neighboring districts? Are we being competitive?
Well, I think there's a couple things. One is the right way to do it is whatever that transportation cost is, shouldn't go to the transportation budget. It should go back to the actual athletic event or the team so that you can actually look and see what does football cost us, right? If you look at the budget, you might see the head coach, you might see the assistant coaches. Should we see the transportation costs for all the games they have to travel to? Should it be a portion of the athletic director, a portion of the athletic trainer? Should it be a portion of the stadium lights or the water for the stadium? We don't account for some of this stuff in a way where we can actually see what something costs to then take that fee and go, all right, so if the fee is this and 100 kids normally come out, I guess we're taking this divided by 100 and that's the fee. I mean, you could look at some of these things as an average over 2 or 3 years and get an idea what your fee should be.
So Ted, are you saying we should do that moving forward?
I
Is that your
absolutely-
plan?
I was gonna say, you can't do that
If I don't have the
you're
data.
not good at the
Right.
number.
Yeah, I think we've got to look at that data and then we've got to make some recommendations and some difficult decisions of, do the people who are using the service need to pay for it? Because we're not in a position where we can raise taxes and ask everybody in our boundaries to give a little more. I'd say
So what does that look like? Is that like a fee for playing football and it all goes
which
towards these
which
services?
we have, but it might need
Bigger.
to be increased. I don't. It's obviously our athletic fees are obviously not covering us because I'm having to transfer $580,000 from the general fund just to break even. So it could be looking at any number of things of what it costs to get a proper accounting, and then divide that out. And again, there's ways districts do this, right? You could still you scholarship in students who are on free lunch. You do a reduced rate for kids who are on reduced lunch. You don't want to raise fees to the point where some kids aren't able to participate. But in my experience, people will pay for those things that they value. It's just like transportation, right? If I were to say, let's raise taxes for this 1.5 million, why should you have to raise your taxes for a bus your kid doesn't ride on because you get up and drive them? I really think we've got to start addressing whether or not fees are the right thing to do.
And to that point, how do the neighboring districts handle the commuting to school and home on a bus? Are they subsidizing like we are? The
So
student riding?
there's a
or-
couple different ways. Several charge fees. Some charge, a trip there and a trip home. They'll charge a round trip fee. You get a little key card and you buzz it. I don't think we have to be that sophisticated. I think we could say, here's your bus pass. $200-$300 would not be unreasonable. And if you think about it as a parent, if you had to drive your kid to school and pick them up 72 days or 166 days a year, when gas is $4 a gallon, $300 is a bargain. And you're going to get parents who go, yeah, but what about my taxes? My taxes already pay for that. Well, transportation isn't a right like education. Education is a guaranteed right. You have the right to a free and appropriate public education. You do not have a right to, and I know this sounds brutal to say, but we're talking about budget here. You don't have a right to be transported to school. We might have to look at a fee for service.
Well, and I can imagine a couple of things I wanted to point out. The one was I was so surprised when I learned that there were some routes that are 2 hours for these kids to get to school in the morning and then to get home later in the day. So total 4 hours of being in a bus. And on top of that, a majority of them are elementary school kids. They're coming, from Running Creek, and that's how long that commute is. I can't imagine, if I had a kindergartner or first grader or second grader.
I only spent 2 hours.
To be on a bus for 4 hours, that's just so long. And so I would imagine too that there might be a good number of parents who, are like, I don't want to submit my kid to having to be on a bus for 2 hours. That's just too much time on a bus, especially that little.
Yeah.
But so I just wondered too if you felt like this might be a good area to survey parents on, to find out whether or not, folks really need / want this type of system that we have in place, how they might be open to some changes, and or what would it look like if we phase some things out or change some things? What would their response be to that? I just wonder if it was up to me, if I knew that paying for my bus, if I wanted to have my kids to ride the bus, was going to open up several $100,000 worth of salary that could go to better teachers or to get great teachers or to give our great teachers raises, I would be open to that. But I wouldn't know that was an issue unless the school presented me with that type of a scenario. And so, especially in situations that we're in right now, I just want to be as wise as we can be with the money that we have, and to continue, putting money into a program where I'm not even sure how many, if it's a very large, significant percentage of students. If we're just talking about commuting back and forth from school, like how many families, aren't even a part of that altogether. Their parents are driving them anyway, or the kids walk to school if they're close enough. So anyway, I'd just like to have some more information and maybe even get, a feel for what the community feels is the right path forward.
Yeah, we can find a way to gather data. I just want to be transparent that if we don't change something for the long term, we just need to get used to the fact that it's $1.5 million every year that we're gonna be transferring over. And we can do the same thing for athletics, right? We can dig in a little deeper, we can do some surveys, we can look at actual costs.
I think we should start tracking the actual costs, so we know exactly what it's
We
costing.
need to do that.
We do need to do
And have it broken down. I'm gonna ask a little more detail on the transportation numbers, both the salaries and the expenses by location.
Yep.
Now that I know to call it.
Now that you know,
And if there's low-hanging fruit, I'd love to see some options for even just modest reductions. If there's just, hey, if you did these two things, that's $300,000.
okay,
So on the salaries, it looks like the salaries have been reduced by $400,000 from the previous budget to this. So the salaries have been reduced, so then and I'll ask a question about that in a minute, but then the expenses for transportation have increased by $322,000. So questions on two of them. Have we got fewer employees in transportation now that the salaries are reduced? And how come we have so many more expenses? Is it because gas prices have what?
yeah,
What'd you
so,
say?
yeah, but the bus lease is huge, 300 and some odd thousand in the bus
Yeah.
lease. Employees, yes, that's my recommendation, is to reduce some staff there. If we have low-hanging fruit in terms of routes, we might, not need as many routes, those types of things, if we cut the number of stops, so yes, I think that is an area where we do have to,
Okay.
and again, this is another one of those, like I talked about, it is very difficult to have to make this decision this late in the year, but I think that's an area where we probably need some vacancy savings.
Mhm.
But yes, so when you look at, the actual, supply area of it, it did increase. A big chunk of that is that bus lease. And again, I believe we only have a year or two of that left. I've also talked with, Jeff recently about, well, if we leased all these new buses, have we sold the other ones? Can we get anything for that? We met with the insurance company today, and some of those buses, the old buses, we're even still getting charged for on our insurance. So we're gonna expedite that a little bit, like, okay, if we have new buses, these old buses we don't need, let's sell them, let's get that cash in, let's get them off our books so we're not paying insurance on them. There's a lot of little cleanup stuff like that,
Yeah,
that when you get in tough budget years, you need to look at.
Well, it should be anyway, but especially now.
How many buses are we talking about?
I don't know, but I think it's probably 3 to 5, that we could, so we're gonna look through some of that. There were, 46 vehicles on our insurance. Makes no sense to me in a district
clean
this
that.
size. I don't know where they're all parked.
Is it personal?
There's,
Are they all in the lot over there?
yeah, I need to look. There was like a van from 1996. I wanna know where that's at.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
But yeah, so we've got some cleanup on some of that type of stuff to look at. Going through insurance today was a really good way to see what assets you have in the district that you're being charged for that maybe we can go look at.
And insurance isn't cheap these days.
No.
Nearly $500,000. No, it's not.
Speaking of insurance, I do have a question on line 800. Looking like that's going, is that going down?
Going down. So part of that I think is an accounting thing. So there are parts in the budget I talked about earlier where we're taking centralized costs and actually accounting them to the schools.
Yeah.
So if you were to look at the spreadsheet behind this that shows the individual schools that go up to those budgets up above, right, 270 for Running Creek, 420 for Singing Hills, some of those costs now live there. They're the property insurance, the workers' comp are living in the schools. I can't 100% say for sure. I'm pretty sure that's why that dropped, is they got moved over. Our utilities certainly are not going
I was
down.
about to say, nobody's utilities going
Our
down.
insurance is not going down.
So
Our insurance
This
went up.
line would represent any utilities or insurance that does not exist inside a school.
For the most part, yes. There are a few here and there that for some reason, the way this original budget was built, for example, transportation has a line item in theirs for workers' comp. I don't know why their workers' comp is in there, because the business office workers' comp isn't in theirs, the superintendent's office workers' comp isn't in theirs. There's some interesting things as we work through the budget, but it's what we were handed and we could not completely rebuild it. We will be using a completely different format next year. We'll be starting from scratch. Andrea's already working with CDE to get the right templates. But some of this was just, okay, if that's where it lives, that's where it lives. We have to get this approved by June 30th. We can't rebuild the whole spreadsheet. So for the most part, yes, it's either there or in schools, other than there's a few areas where it is in a department. But those are very few and far between. And maybe there might have been a good reason for why that was in there at one point. I don't know. It doesn't make sense that it's in some and not others to me, but yes, both of those costs have gone up in totality. And this is another thing where hopefully as you know, Andrea starts new working with CDE to get this stuff in templates, you wanna see that same template every year so it's apples to apples. I mean, when you're looking at something different every year, it's really hard as a board for you to go, well, why did this go down? Like, you can say, I remember last year when we used the same template, you said this. It's hard when we keep moving the target on you. So we're gonna get to one and use the actual templates that CDE recommends that their people use, so we're all on the same page.
What's another thing, when these numbers are correct, the schools themselves now can constantly know, okay, this is how much budget I have left. I'm 3 months in and I've spent half my budget. Okay.
Better slow down.
Better slow down. Okay.
Tablets, chisel.
Yep.
And then general fund stipends and benefits.
That to me appeared to be a catch-all, where, again, as I've said before, I think one of the mistakes that put us in this situation is we had a lot of promises going on. A lot of individual stipends, a lot of individual raises, things like that. I have to assume those were in there. I'm hoping they were budgeted somewhere, but we have a salary schedule that we are going to stick to, so I slash that immensely. So we do have some for an example of something that I'm proposing. I haven't shared this with staff yet, so you guys will hear it first. We spend $15,000 a year on cell phone stipends. It just doesn't make any sense to me. 10 years ago, if people were still being charged by the minute, and I said, hey David, I need to be able to call you if the boiler goes out, I could maybe understand that. It makes no sense to me that we're giving several employees $40 a month for a cell phone stipend, for this idea that I need you to be available 24/7. We all have cell phones anyways, and again, I would think if staff members knew, look, this $15,000 could have kept us from having to, riff a para, I think they would be okay with that. I verified with Tyler that every employee has a radio. So you already have a radio in your classroom. You've got, a radio on your belt if you're an administrator. Cell phones, everybody has them. If we quit doing a $40 stipend, people aren't gonna get rid of their cell phone. They're still going to keep it. It almost feels a little bit like we're enriching people personally on taxpayer dollars, because I don't know that there's a business purpose. I mean, I didn't ask for a cell phone allowance in my contract, and I'm pretty sure I have to be available 24/7. There are just some stipends like that don't make sense to me in 2026 when we're having to RIF people. There's some other stipends we've got to look at and see if they're in there. There's stipends for various things that HR and finance have done a great job of putting some processes to. We were handing out stipends for hard to fill, and as you saw, we got rid of that policy because it wasn't being followed. We'll have to put in place an internal procedure for what actually is hard to fill. It just had a lot of money, and again, my feeling is if we added up all that money, we probably could have given everybody $1,500 instead of $1,000. Like, again, we have to help people understand when we're being nickeled and dimed with all this stuff, it hurts our ability to give real compensation raises to the whole group. So I decreased that quite a bit because, and I've got a document I'm working on that I'll send out to staff closer to the start of school that kind of says, guys, please quit doing this. Like, the answer is always going to be no. If you walk into my office and say I need $2,000 or I'm gonna go get another job, I'm going to say, you have to do what's best for you, I have to do what's best for the system. And I can't meet everybody's individual needs, because there's a lot of great employees in this district who chose not to do that, and now they're getting paid less than people who chose to do it. And I think in some cases, we're encouraged to do that by their leaders, and we need to stop that. So I don't see the need for that large of an account there, because it's not something we're gonna use moving forward.
I have a question though on the numbers on that general fund stipends and benefits. You were saying you've reduced that, but it actually looks like it's increased. So it says $300,000 for this 26-27, it was $116,822.
Yeah, that,
You should say earlier, I added a little buffer because we don't know the unexpected.
yeah, but no, that, I'd have to go back and look. We absolutely dropped that. I'd have to go back into my notes and see, where
Heard
that,
too, I was waiting for
where that came. Good catch, Mary.
Beat you, David,
Yeah, no, I'd have to go back and look, cause we dropped that pretty significantly. And I'm wondering if that's in the, well, if I could get into Google Docs, I could look. It might be in the newest update.
Well, where are you accounting for, new employees who might take benefits that you didn't account for before?
So in that, that's what I was joking about earlier when I said every time Michelle hires someone, if they get benefits.
Yeah,
So
but
it
is it kind of
changes.
right there
So when
in
you
that
look,
spot?
no, that would be in the actual salary and benefits line
Yeah,
of each department or school. So if you look at the very end where you see our reserves and you see $755,000, and you see I have an unassigned fund balance of 1,677. That number continues to fluctuate because as new people come in and get benefits, so if someone comes in right now and takes $10,000 in benefits, I'm now going to be in the negative, right?
right, but I was just wondering if you were accounting for any, like, little bit of room in any of these other categories for those types of situations.
So as they come in, we're adjusting.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are trying to stay to the penny, so that idea of, do we leave a little bit here or there? If we do, I think it would mean cutting another person. So if push comes to shove and when we're all hired out, we're 80 grand in the red because 8 people chose full family benefits, then we're gonna have to go to department budgets and cut.
I see. When are we going to know that final number?
Closer to the start of school, we're still doing some hiring, in key positions like language arts, math, stuff like that.
Okay.
So we're getting closer. We will have to come together at some point in July and approve, new hires,
Okay.
even if just real quickly, but there
And
will.
how many more do you expect?
8-ish, maybe, I'm trying to think. That's not including coaches. When you look at our website of how many open jobs we have, most of them are coaches. I don't know, Michelle, would you think 8, 10, somewhere in there probably still open?
Yeah, there's still some movement because we've made offers and then rejected and there's some movement going on. As far as benefits go, anybody that starts in July, they're eligible for benefits, September. And so for the benefits, that number's gonna push up a little bit.
Might be 7,000 instead of 8,000 or something like that, but yeah, that is where, and that's another thing where it's like we're so tight, we're gonna have to, like, this Google Doc will just stay on my computer constantly. We are just going to have to keep
Living
watching it. It
document.
will be a living document.
It's gonna be his wallpaper.
Yeah, it's going to have to be because we're going to be that tight. And so and again, the only other way to do it is to not be that tight and possibly have to rip a couple more employees so you don't have to watch it as closely, and none of us wanna do that.
We're hoping to do one and done.
really wanted to.
That actually brings me to a question that I had, just generally speaking, now that we've talked about a lot of the specifics, but, you know, as we're moving forward, what types of reporting mechanisms are going to be in place so that we're monitoring this living document to make sure that we're gonna end up where we wanna end up?
Yeah.
Monthly presentation.
Yes, I already told Andrea, you guys will get to know her. I think some updates specifically on, very early, we're gonna have to watch cash flow. And I think that's something as a board, again, you've got to hold us to, we wanna see it. What's our cash flow? Where are we at? How much is coming out every month in pay and benefits and those types of things. And yeah, I think some type of overall health report, CDE has been very helpful when they met with us of being able to suggest some things that we could provide. But it's really going to be staying up to date, like you said, if we're 3 months in and we've spent half our money, you guys need to know. I can tell you prior to that, there's a lot of other things that we're already working on to try to clamp down on some of that. I think having done this before in another place, things like no overtime without prior approval, no travel, no conferences. We have employees, a community member pointed this out on our P cards. We have employees purchasing hotels in Denver. Like, most of us would not spend our own money to stay in a hotel 30 minutes away. We just wouldn't. And so, stopping overnight travel, halting conferences, no reimbursements without prior approval. Jeannie's got a whole list for me. She sees it all come in, and she knows where we've got to clamp down. I think we've just gotten very liberal with our spending. It's like we're not even paying attention in some cases. And so we're gonna implement some things that put some better guardrails up, so that when we show those numbers to you every month, if I tell you we're gonna put some guardrails on P cards, you guys should be asking every month, let's see it. You said you were gonna stop this, you said we weren't gonna do this, prove it. Some of those things where we've spent money, where we've gotten a little out of sorts, when we hit true up, I'd be asking us in October what October count is. Are we up kids, are we down kids? How does that change your projections? I think CDE has a pretty good layout of the types of things we should be focusing on every month. And it's one of the things we've talked about if we're able to get the retreat together this summer to have them come in and share. And the nice thing is it's a calendar and it's a routine, right? Every September you should do this. Every October you should do that. But really, in my opinion, we should kind of have two standing discussion items, and one is budget and one is academic achievement. Those things should be discussed at every meeting. There's a lot of other work that we have to do, but the rest of it doesn't really matter. If we can't make payroll and our kids aren't learning, what are we doing?
I don't care about a policy if the kids are failing.
Correct, and so we kind of need those two standing agenda items. And I would expect that you ask us for real data and then follow up. We should be able to prove some of the assessments that we're going to will be quarterly, but there's other stuff we should be able to show you pretty early on in terms of where we're at and get a gauge of how that's looking. I'd be asking schools to come in and present. Hey, we know these changes were made. How are academics looking? How is that? I would expect Running Creek to be able to come in here and show you how much better this new system is working. You might ask principals or operational directors, in October, how are, these new budget parameters working? Are you getting by without a phone stipend, or, do we need to do something different? We can set up a lot of different reports. I think part of it is, don't take my word for it. Ask the people who are actually implementing this. Ask these ladies for updates. And I've shared with them, and I've shared with Jamie, I don't ever want any of these people to ever feel any way about coming directly to this board if they ever feel I'm not doing something right. They should absolutely feel they can come straight to you. Michelle in HR should absolutely feel she should come straight to you, and you guys should remind them that if they face any retaliation at all, they should come right back to you. We have to change, some of that culture. I want the board hearing from the people who are who are doing the work, not just the superintendent who might not be telling you the whole story. Dig a layer deeper. It's great that I'm sitting here, and I don't mind presenting the budget, but next year it should be Andrea, right? We should go a layer deeper and actually ask and make sure I'm telling you the truth. So we can, I think, easily set up a routine for that, of what that looks like. But I would caution the board, don't stray from budget and academic achievement. The rest of the stuff we can figure out, but it really doesn't matter if those two, and if those two aren't getting better, you should have someone else sitting here. So I would continually ask difficult questions about those two areas.
Thank you.
Trying to think if there's any other things we talked about a lot. That's all the notes that I had to make sure that I shared.
We did, we talked about a lot.
And again, you'll continue to see updates there, even in this budget. Ron was all ready to point out a couple things that we've got to come back and fix. So we will be continually
I was gonna say, this is gonna be an ongoing conversation.
ongoing. Yeah, the things that were brought up, I didn't see it till right before I came in here, but I'm like, yep, we'll get those fixed, and we'll figure out like when it's appropriate to bring back revisions, or does it need
This
to be?
budget, you guys submit this to us.
Yes, we've got it by June 30th, pass a budget, but we'll also then decide and talk with those who have proven that they've done this work right, like Ron, like, what do we do? Is this just a board memo to update the board? Does this need to be a transparent conversation? Does this actually need to be resubmitted? Those types of things. So we've got a lot of help. CDE's offered to help. We've got people, again, in the community who have done this job and done it well, who are willing to help. So everybody wants to see this succeed. So I think you're gonna get a lot more transparent communication, and if it's not going well, you're gonna be the second to know the minute I do.
And I know we've mentioned it a few times, but I do just wanna say thank you to all of the folks in the back of the room who, I know Ty couldn't have done it without your help. So I'm very grateful for your expertise and your knowledge, your long historical knowledge, and I thank you.
Absolutely.
Alright, you ready? Okay. And can I get a roll?
Director Fletcher?
Aye.
Director Hunt?
Aye.
Director Olson?
Aye.
Director Top?
Hi.
Okay, so next up we have the 26-27 interfund borrowing resolution. So I move that the board approve the 2026-2027 interfund borrowing resolution as presented. Nicole, can I get a second?
Second. Your second girl.
Just put Nicole down.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, so, do you want to explain this?
So this is another one that, by law, we have to do, and it's really kind of letting the board know / getting permission to move amounts between funds. You saw on the budget, I mean, not only do you sometimes use the general fund to supplement one of these other accounts, but by law, I think like a nutrition account, you can take like 10% and transfer it to general fund. So this is, and these numbers, I can tell you, will get better and more accurate as we get closer, but it's really being transparent and that we will be moving money around from fund to fund.
And
as
that's
we
just
go.
a typical financial practice, right?
Yeah,
That's not
it's.
anything shady or anything. That's just
No, this is,
Send that
You're
to the-
notified.
yeah, this is something that, I mean, every district has to do. The number of funds are different, the dollar amounts are different, but my understanding is it's really just, allowing us to be transparent that you'll move money from one fund to another occasionally. You guys will be able to see that live and in living color every month. As we present these, I think you'll be able to see where we've transferred money, you know, if we hit May and the $580,000 wasn't enough for athletics and we gotta, you know, say, hey, as we're finishing out the budget, we think we gotta transfer more money over, we'd have to transfer more money over to put that account in the black, those types of things, we'd wanna be transparent about.
So basically what you're doing here, according to the verbiage here, is you're borrowing and then you have 3 months to pay it
To
back.
go
So you're
back,
just-
yeah.
And
Yeah.
then I think you answered my question, so borrowing from the food service fund, because I was always told that's not an option, the 10%.
That's my understanding is you can do some, and again, part of it, like, you know, we've said, like, I don't wanna ever borrow from the capital reserve fund. You know, we should be putting money in there, but I think it's more, I don't know how I'd categorize it, more of a
Safety
transparent
net.
heads up that this may or may not happen.
And it's 3 months after the beginning of the next budget year. It's not just 3 months from when you do it, it looks like, according to this. You have to repay it not later than 3 months after the beginning of the following budget year.
Yeah, and I think what I've seen in the past is sometimes here, some of these were nearly wiped out to transfer over to the general fund to try to balance that budget, and then going into the next year, you might see some of that money come back to start them out and make them whole. Some of these, like I've said, I don't wanna ever have to do that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I know we're in a pickle right now, but generally speaking, I'd like us to be able to not have to do this.
To do that, correct.
Yeah, it would be first choice for sure.
Okay, so, any further discussion on this? All right, can I get a roll call?
Director Fletcher? Director Hunt?
Aye.
Director Olson?
Aye.
Director Powell?
Aye.
Okay, sorry, I thought it was gonna be a long one. 2026, 2027, beginning fund balance resolution. So I move that the board approve the 26-27 beginning fund balance resolution as presented. Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, you wanna break that streak? Alright, and discussion.
Is that right after the other one? I'm not.
Yeah, it's not in there. So this is kind of a strange one, because we put it on to be transparent, and I'm not 100% sure. As we created this budget, we created this from a zero-based perspective, meaning in the past, there's no way you can have negative $131,000 in unassigned reserves and then say you're build the next budget saying we're starting with $439,000 in nutrition and we're starting with $300,000 in athletics. And so from I think it's a difference between, as Tracy continues to explain it to me, between cash flow and fund balance, but we literally built the budget, and so we put it on the agenda when we posted the agenda to be safe. But as we dug in, it's just something I don't feel comfortable asking the board to, which is why we didn't move forward with it, to approve that when we're starting at zero. We are most likely, you know, on paper, going to end the year, the fiscal year, once everything's journaled back, in the red. So we're not starting with any beginning fund balance. So yeah, on paper, I suppose you could say we're starting out with $400,000 in nutrition and $300,000 here. I want to be transparent with you guys and the community. We might start out in the red. We're not going to meet Tabor, we don't think. We're probably not going to be in the positive. So we're starting out at zero. That's how we built the budget. There is nothing in that 26-27 budget where we assumed we were carrying over even a penny. So we didn't move it forward in terms of formal, but since we'd already posted it on the agenda because we were looking at it, I wanted to be transparent that I don't see how we can move forward, you know, asking the board to approve a beginning fund balance of zero. Like we built the budget based on where we think we're actually going to be, best case scenario. So there's no formal action that needs to happen, but I wanted to be transparent with you and the community because I don't, whether it was done from an accounting perspective correctly in the past, it wasn't transparent to this board. You know, you were sitting there thinking we're starting off the year with 1.6 million. No, we didn't. We didn't even meet Tabor, so some of these types of things, I think will be a little more routine for us next year, but it's been a weird spring budget season in terms of trying to be transparent versus trying to do things the way they've been done the past couple of years, and I'd rather rely on transparency than anything else.
I mean, next year we've already met, I mean, assuming this budget goes, then we've already met Tabor
Correct.
mostly for the next year, right?
Yeah. And then we can say we're starting out the year with $800,000. Well, we are, but we aren't. You know,
Yeah,
it's
not
like,
really, yeah.
and again, that's why I think to be transparent, you have to talk unassigned reserves and cash. That's just, I think that's how most of us live our lives. And we have to make that clearer to the board versus, you know.
Yeah, just cause I have 400,000 in my 401k doesn't mean I can just go take that.
Yeah, you don't tell people you got $400,000 in the bank, and so, so we didn't actually bring the resolution forward because I don't think it's needed if we're not.
Sounds like we get to vote nay again on the motion that we just brought
Yeah,
forward.
that's right. Or we can just withdraw the motion too. I mean, since there isn't anything to vote on.
Okay.
That might be more
I'm fine with that.
appropriate on this one, is to just withdraw the motion.
Okay. So first withdraw the motion.
Which I know, I got 4 no's and withdraw.
What do I do with that?
I know it.
Where's Jay when you need her to be writing up these notes?
She's
Should we tell
she's
someone else
showing
that?
us how valuable as a board clerk she is, as I mess everything up.
Well, you did great. I mean, you kind of whipped through our roll calls really well.
I'm trying. Well, she wrote it all down for me.
Well, I know, but you know, thank you.
I could not have
But
done
she
that.
uses them herself, so you have to have those things in front of you, you just do. So anyway.
JV the parliamentary.
So, with that, I move to withdraw my motion.
I'll second that.
That's great.
She just wanted another.
She didn't write this one down.
So can I get a roll call?
Director Fletcher,
Aye.
Director Hunt,
Aye.
Director Olson.
Aye.
Director Powell.
Hi.
Okay, so we have one more item, and that's the one that, sorry for that, everyone. That's the one that I moved from,
What's it?
yeah. So, the superintendent contract, there's a couple of amendments I want to propose, and you're not gonna see them because they're on the board notice and they're not in the folder. But, you have the original here. And I think it was at the very, very beginning. That was shown. Okay. So on 1.3, basically read that out and instead put in there renewal of agreement. This agreement shall not renew automatically. The term may be extended only by affirmative action of the board taken at a public meeting and reduced to a written amendment signed by both parties on or before January 31st of the applicable year. Absent such action, this agreement shall expire on the termination date set forth in paragraph 1.1. Above, superintendent shall, by placement of the topic on the board agenda on or before November 15th of each year, remind the board to consider whether to extend this agreement, which date shall be at least 2 months prior to the board meeting where renewal or non-renewal is to be considered. So this is basically just keeping up with the tradition that we were doing with Dan. We would add it to the agenda and just,
It's just sort of an affirmative thing rather than just a rolling on.
well, and we did, you know, we put in a consent, we approved consent.
Yeah.
So it's basically just keeping up with the way we've been doing it. So,
You okay with that?
Yeah, Rhonda had shared this with me. I think it's almost defaults to no versus yes, which I absolutely would suggest as a board, like, that is absolutely okay.
and then the only other changes iPad. It's a long contract. My screen is a little slow. So in 8.4, and there were a few cross-reference, changes that it fixed, 6 versus 8. So in 8.4, I added mitigation and offset, which basically says any amount otherwise payable shall be reduced dollar for dollar by compensation superintendent earns or becomes entitled to earn from other employment or consulting during what would otherwise have been the remaining term. Superintendent shall use reasonable efforts to secure comparable employment and shall report such earnings to the district. So basically, you know, if there is a decision to terminate, it's, you know, it's basically you're not just paying out for a year and then they can go off and do whatever they want.
And also, wasn't there something about no lump sum payment either, right?
Well, and that's,
Oh, sorry.
okay. So it's basically no
I thought it
different
was all
than
one.
a district dime. Next is installments. So payments under this section shall be made in regular installments over the offset period rather than as a lump sum and shall cease upon superintendent's death or material breach of any obligation surviving termination. So rather than a lump sum, it's, you know, it'll be paid out monthly like it's.
Nice, huh?
And then notwithstanding any other provision of this agreement, all payment obligations under this section are subject to the annual appropriation limitations set forth in paragraph 1.1. Such obligations constitute a current expense of the district payable solely from the funds appropriated for the then current fiscal year, shall not constitute a multiple fiscal year direct or indirect debt or other financial obligation of the district within the meaning of Article 5, Section 28 of the Colorado Constitution, and shall be payable only in installments not exceeding the amount appropriated within the fiscal year, which I think that's pretty basic. So, those are the changes that I proposed. And
Yeah, the only thing I would just clarify for the community is any of that, like, buyout language is only if I'm fired without cause.
Yeah.
That's only if the board just shows up tomorrow and says, you know what, we've changed our mind. I can still be fired with cause and I walk away with 0. I can decide to leave and I walk away with 0. We can mutually decide that I leave and I walk away with 0. You know, most of these contracts are written this way, not for the current board and the superintendent, but for if another board comes in. So many, you know, districts, that's how it is. You're not negotiating a contract with the board that hires you. It's for the one who later might fire you. And so that would just be, you know, let's say another board comes in 2 years and says, you know, we don't like you, you're gone. Superintendents want some type of income insurance. As I've shared with Rhonda, I'm not too worried about this. As I told you guys before, I wasn't ever interested in being superintendent again and don't want to be superintendent anywhere else. So it's not like if this doesn't work out, I go look for another superintendent job. So I am perfectly comfortable with all of those things. I don't think it is smart for a school board in a financial situation like this to try to do some golden parachute for a superintendent. That makes no sense at all. So I'm more than happy with the revised language.
so any further discussion on this one? Okay. So we will, I haven't made a motion yet. So I move that the board approve the revised superintendent contract for Dr.
Ted.
For
Or
Ted. Okay,
I'll second.
okay. And any further discussion on this? Okay, can you hear roll call?
Director Fletcher,
Aye.
Director Hunt,
Aye.
Director Olson, Director Powell.
Aye.
Okay. And with that, our next board meeting, believe it or not, is, August 11th. Our next regularly scheduled board meeting. So August 11th, 2026, here in the Boardman District Office. And with that, I adjourn this meeting at, it looks like 8:42.